Live from downtown Lansing, you're listening to The Spartan Beat with your hosts, Corey Robinson and Justin Finn.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us for another episode of The Spartan Beat. I'm Justin Thind. As usual, I'm here with my co-host Corey Robinson. This time I'm not in studio as I've moved back home. I've graduated from Michigan State, so we're doing this remote type deal. But the show goes on. Today our guest is Tom Shanahan from the website The Shanahan Report. And Tom, thanks so much for joining us today. How you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. So for those of you out there that don't know who Tom is, do you want to go ahead and kind of just give a rundown before we dive into the specifics of your MSU material, and just give a background of who you are, like what kind of work you do, how you got involved in the industry, and just all of that sort of stuff?
Okay, sure. I'm a Michigan State grad, and I was sports editor of the State News my senior year. I graduated in 1978, so I'm an old guy. Worked on the paper for 3 years. Grew up in Big Rapids, Michigan, and always wanted to go to Michigan State. My father was a professor at Ferris State, and we moved there from Cleveland in 1964. I was in elementary school. So right when those 65 and 66 teams became national champions. And so I was always a Michigan State fan first, never a Michigan fan. Always wanted to go to Michigan State. It was the only school I applied to, and once I got accepted, I went. I've always loved history as a kid. And even as a kid, I knew there was something unusual about the Michigan State teams because they had so many black players. And then most of all, they had a black quarterback. But, you're just a kid. You don't understand what the civil rights movement is about exactly. And so it wasn't until later I kind of put it all together. And it was always in the back of my head that there was something special that happened here, and the story had never been properly told. I graduated, and I worked out in San Diego at the San Diego Union Tribune. I worked at Oceanside, California, a suburban paper, and then got on at the San Diego Union Tribune, covered just about everything, college, pro, and high school sports. I've always loved high school sports and still do. And so the newspaper business started to die. I took a job back in North Carolina, where I live now, with an internet company. And while I was in San Diego, I got to know Jimmy Ray's son, Jimmy Ray III, who was a vice president of personnel with the Chargers. And Jimmy Ray is from Fayetteville, North Carolina, the South's first black quarterback to win a national title while playing for the Spartans. So he is from Fayetteville, North Carolina, and he still lives in Pinehurst. And so I talked to Jimmy Ray III and said, hey, can you introduce me to your dad? I want to see if there's a book that can be put together on the Michigan State's 65 and 66 teams that led the integration of college football. And the best thing about it is all the players were very cooperative and happy to get the story out there because they also feel it hadn't been told properly. So went from there and came out with the book Ray of Light, Jimmy Ray, Duffy Daugherty, the 1965-66 Michigan State Spartans, and the integration of college football, forward by Tony Dungy. And people say to me, wow, how'd you get Tony Dungy to write the forward? And I say, easy, Jimmy Ray asked him, because Tony has always considered Jimmy a mentor. In addition to Jimmy being a pioneer black quarterback in college football, Duffy Daugherty hired Jimmy and Sherman Lewis, who is from Louisville, Kentucky, and they were two of the first black coaches in college football, and then they were also pioneers in the NFL as black coaches.
Yeah, that's great to hear that and an actual like Spartan is the one doing this story. That this was like your passion from even back when you were a student there. So great to see you tell the story the right way and with someone that had such a passion for the subject matter from the beginning. Corey, I guess do you want to have him dive into the book a little bit now?
Yeah, definitely. So you had written another book before that. So what made you want the Jimmy Ray one specifically?
Well, actually, the Jimmy Ray book is my first one. I'm working on another one now. That might be what you remember me telling you. Like I say, the story of Michigan State's groundbreaking teams had never been told properly, and I wanted to do the research. I guess the thing that really motivated me is you only hear about Bubba Smith, George Webster, Gene Washington, Clinton Jones, all in the College Football Hall of Fame. And then, of course, Jimmy Ray was an all Big Ten quarterback, Charlie Thornhill, and a couple of other guys that were from the South that played for the Spartans on Duffy's teams. But, anybody remotely related to college football knows that coaches don't go 7 for 7 or 8 for 8 in recruiting. So I knew there had to be a lot more Underground Railroad passengers, guys that Duffy had recruited from the South. And I wanted to define that, find out who the first one was. And from there, I found all kinds of things that I didn't know that debunked a lot of myths about Alabama and Bear Bryant, his relationship with Duffy Daugherty. But the most interesting thing I found out, there were 44 players, black players from the South, not black players from the South, because Michigan State has always had black players from Flint, Michigan factory towns. They've always had a Midwest-based roster, and they were always ahead of the nation in black athletes in that way, too. The Southern recruits just made Michigan State the first fully integrated rosters. What happened, what was going on until Michigan State changed the landscape is colleges throughout the country would limit their rosters to a half dozen or so black athletes. It was sort of an unwritten quota. And for example, the 1962 USC national championship team had only 5 black players. The 1967 USC national championship team with O.J. Simpson had only 7 black players. That's pretty startling when you think about it, because Los Angeles is obviously a huge population and a very diverse population. So you have to try and not have more than a half dozen black athletes in a place like USC. Yet somehow USC got this reputation as the model of integration, from this 1970 USC-Alabama game that was a myth, a fiction propped up to hide Bear Bryant's track record of dragging his feet on integration and to aggrandize USC's role in integration. So as an example, I mentioned 5 in 1962 and 7 in 1967. Well, Michigan State had 23 black players on its 1965 national championship team. And on the 1966 team that played Notre Dame in the game of the century, the Spartans had 20 black players, 11 black starters, 2 black co-captains voted by the team, George Webster and Clinton Jones, and of course Jimmy Ray of Fayetteville, North Carolina, as the South's first black quarterback to win a national title. Compare that to Notre Dame, which had only 1 black player on its entire roster, Alan Page. Well, the game of the century drew a record audience of 33 million people. So the nation saw that Michigan State was the future and Notre Dame was the past. And from that point forwards, all the schools started recruiting more black athletes. And the best example of that, as I already told you, USC had 7 black players on its 1967 national championship team. Their next national championship team in 1972, they had 23. So that's how Michigan State changed the landscape of college football.
So what guy would you say was responsible from the South that really got the ball rolling, whether that was a big-name guy that fans know or someone that they really didn't? But who was that guy that really was the first one to kind of get the ball rolling there?
Yeah, well, what happened? The coach most responsible would be Willie Ray Smith Sr., Bubba's father. He was a legendary Texas high school football coach for 33 years during desegregation. Won 235 games, 2 black state titles, sent dozens of players to college, mostly historical black colleges in the South. And then also many of his players went on to the NFL. But what happened, the turning point, the tipping point to all this, was Michigan State already had a reputation, as I mentioned before, from the 1950s, from people everywhere, but particularly the black high school coaches and black football fans in the South. They saw the 1954 and 1956 Rose Bowls, where Michigan State had black stars leading the way to wins in both games. Yeah, and a lot of that was just so Michigan State already had that reputation. And then in the late 1950s, Duffy Daugherty was a keynote speaker for the clinic in Atlanta. And Hank Bullitt had told me this story when I was originally researching Ray of Light. And this is what people don't know about people think Duffy just got lucky with Bubba Smith and a couple of guys. This is the part they don't understand. And even the university, from its administration on down, doesn't understand. They have no institutional memory of this. What happened was Duffy goes to this clinic in Atlanta, and he's a keynote speaker, and he gets there, and he sees that they won't let any of the black high school coaches in. Remember, this is late 1950s, segregated Alabama. And Duffy's irritated by that, upset by it. So he gives his spiel at the clinic, and then he puts on a free clinic just for the black coaches. Well, now these black high school coaches not only know Michigan State's reputation, Duffy's reputation, now they've met Duffy. And Duffy was just such a personable, likable guy. Anybody would like him. And so from that point forward, many of the black coaches and even other people in the South, not just the black coaches, started contacting Duffy Daugherty and said, hey, I got this player for you. You should take a look at him. And Bubba Smith's father sent 7 players from the Houston area between 1963 and 1967. So that's the missing piece that the nation doesn't understand, and even Michigan State's hierarchy doesn't understand, its student body doesn't understand. And I wish I had a nickel for every time somebody's finished reading Ray of Light, and they've contacted me and they've said, I never knew any of this. And some of this is from older people that went to school in the 60s. They didn't understand the magnitude, that Duffy actually had a network. It wasn't just luck. And what they all say is they're proud to learn that their university was on the right side of history.
Yeah, I can admit that a lot of this stuff is not even that. Yeah, I don't know if there was an echo there or might not, but so yeah, I was gonna say definitely agree with you about how all of this stuff was not known by a lot of the people out there. I know I personally didn't know any of these tidbits, like you said, about how Coach Duffy put on that free clinic for the black coaches in the South, how that would have endeared him and built his network down there. So these are the kind of tidbits that you need somebody that's such a subject matter expert like you to kind of put out there. So really, really fascinating stuff. Everyone, make sure you go check out Tom's website, the Shanahan Report. Make sure you go out there and get his book, The Ray of Light. And Tom, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. You're a wealth of knowledge, and keep spreading this information out there.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for having me. One little piece of information, though. I changed my website, and partly so I can focus more on this message of Michigan State's history, and it's now TomShanahan.report. Don't put .com because it'll take you to a default page. Just TomShanahan.report, and you'll find a link to purchasing Ray of Light. Just look for the quote from Tony Dungy. But I really appreciate you having me on and letting me tell the story.
Thanks a lot, Tom. I'm happy to have you on.
So now we'll go ahead and head out onto a break, and when we return, Stephen Brooks is going to be joining us, and we're going to be talking about some recruiting.
Call it a sense of purpose, a higher calling, essential to our children's future. We call it our passion at Dean Transportation. We are a family, hardworking folks who for more than 60 years have connected children to learning, schools to our communities, and you to a better career, pioneering the best in health and safety standards because it's simply what we do, because safe student transportation has always been essential. Dean is now hiring community-focused individuals for immediate school bus driver, attendant, and mechanic positions for local schools throughout mid-Michigan. To learn more, visit jobs@dean.com/Lansing. Experienced applicants will receive up to a $750 sign-on bonus. For individuals with no prior experience, Dean will pay you to train. Positions may also allow you to start and stop work from local parking locations or your home throughout mid-Michigan. If you're looking to make the community a better place, we'll put you in the driver's seat. Join the Dean Transportation family today at jobs@dean.com/Lansing.
NBC News Radio, I'm Brian Shook. President Biden is in Great Britain for his first overseas trip as Commander-in-Chief. Speaking to Air Force personnel and families at a British military base, the president said he has a message to democracies around the world.
The United States is back, and democracies of the world are standing together to tackle the toughest challenges and the issues that matter most to our future.
Biden also noted his summit next week with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Geneva. The Air Force is saying that reports of a shooting at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio may have been a false alarm. Lieutenant Colonel Brian Lovelace says someone on the base reportedly heard 2 shots fired, which prompted the alarm, but no gunman was seen. Republican Senator Mitt Romney says an infrastructure deal from a bipartisan group in the U.S. Senate would not raise taxes. Speaking with reporters on Capitol Hill, the Utah senator said the plan will likely carry the price tag of $900 billion and noted there would not be enough Republicans to pass the bill should taxes increase. President Biden has proposed raising taxes on U.S. corporations to fund his $1.7 trillion package. The Senate race in Florida is underway with incumbent Marco Rubio responding to the campaign announcement by Val Demings. Rory O'Neill reports.
Orlando Democratic Congresswoman Val Demings uploaded a 3-minute video announcing her campaign for Florida's Senate seat.
There are some in Washington who prefer the same old tired ways of doing business.
In less than an hour, incumbent Republican Senator Marco Rubio posted his response on Twitter.
Congresswoman Val Demings is a do-nothing House member.
With the Senate evenly divided, this race will draw significant national attention and money. I'm Rory O'Neill.
At the close, the Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 152 points to 34,447. You're listening to the latest from NBC News Radio.
Thinking of a new air conditioning unit for your home? Hi, Peggy Doty with Doty Mechanical. A new Carrier high-efficiency AC unit will lower your energy usage and increase your home comfort. Current Carrier Cool Cash offers and available utility rebates mean your savings have never been better.
Call Doty Mechanical today at 327-7777 or visit us at DotyMechanical.com for your free estimate. For heating and cooling, the names to know, Doty Mechanical and Carrier, turn to the experts.
Boyne Golf presents Michigan's Magnificent 10. 10 extraordinary courses set among 3 incredible resorts with plenty of wide open spaces where the extra long days let you play and play and play. And when you're done, a variety of amenities and charming towns await. The golf's so varied, the accommodations so welcoming, each visit's a new experience. So visit BoyneGolf.com to plan your time here. That's BoyneGolf.com.
The Spartan Beat.
Jalen Watts Jackson.
Spotlight Radio Network.
All right, guys. We're back here for the next segment of the Spartan Beat. We have now joining us Corey and myself's colleague over at 24/7 Sports' Spartan Tailgate, and that is Stephen Brooks. Stephen, how you doing today?
Doing great, man. Happy to be on with you guys. Appreciate the opportunity. I've been listening and proud of what you guys have been doing so far. So cool to be a part of it.
Yeah, definitely. As everyone out there knows that checks out our website, Steven is one of the best beat writers that you could read, one of the best beat writers that has a pulse of the Michigan State athletics realm. So it's great to have you here as we talk about the in-person recruiting, the phase that has just started up here as of June 1st, once the dead period ended. This allows coaches to host kids unofficially, host kids officially, also attend satellite camps that are in the area, host camps of their own. We haven't had the chance yet to attend an actual Michigan State on-campus camp, but we did get a chance to go ahead and attend the Sound Mind, Sound Body camp at Ferris State last week. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about the guys that officially visited last weekend, the guys that are going to visit next weekend here, and then just talk about some tidbits that are happening in the recruiting world and things like that. So I guess we'll start off by just going through the guys that visited last week and just kind of some news and notes on those. One of the interesting things about this visit was, as of about Wednesday, we only thought there were 8 guys visiting. Ended up that 10 guys visited. One of those late additions was 2022 four-star wide receiver Antonio Gates. He's a guy that doesn't exactly reveal all of his plans out there. So that's why we didn't exactly know that was happening until just before, but he got on campus. And he went ahead and I think posted on that on social media while he was here. And then another guy that ended up joining the visit late was four-star Texas commit, top 150 wide receiver Amani Winfield. And so those were 2 of the guys. Do you guys have any input on what was your kind of reaction when you figured out that a Texas commit ranked in the top 110, I want to say, decided to make the trek up here to Michigan State, and just kind of decided that was where he wanted to take his first official visit of the dead period?
I think for me it was just the latest in sort of a series of things that happened that first week where you went, wow, a little bit. And look, I mean, I think even the most ardent follower of this stuff can only be wowed so much just by a name showing up. But I mean, day one, I think Dante Moore showing up on campus was a big deal. And then you had, as you mentioned, Antonio Gates locking in for the first official visit weekend. And we know he's been a top tier target for these guys, like basically since day one in this class. And then you mentioned Winfield. You know, like that. Like I said, it was a succession of things that really sort of made you go like, wow. Like, you know, again, like they gotta. It's one thing to get these guys on campus. It's another thing to sign them. It's another thing for them to turn into good players. But that's a heck of a first step, I thought. And like again, it was one of many things that happened that first week where I was like, okay, you know, if you're not fully into this, I think those were some things that probably turned your head and went, whoa, you know, what are they doing? Because, you know, folks like us who are in the weeds, like we've been saying for the longest time, we'll just wait for the dead period end, wait for the dead period end. It's going to be different. Let these guys actually do their jobs the way they were hired to do them, the way they've done them for 5, 10, 20, whatever years, and then sort of see how it goes. But yeah, again, I just think there was a couple head-turning things that first week, and that was one of them.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too, and that was something I mentioned a lot over and over, I think, in the 20 years that the dead period was, whatever it lasted. I tried to bring it back to that 1 week that they had kids on campus that they were allowed to in March when they first got here. Now you have a staff that literally was getting pieced together. I don't even think they had the entire staff together when those visits were happening. And you looked at the guys that they got there so quickly. You got all of the top kids from Michigan and the 21 class in quickly, pretty much, and those guys didn't see campus under D'Antonio for it seemed like a year when they could have seen it. So I mean, I thought that stood out, and then having that big group of California recruits from Premium. So yeah, now that they can have guys on there, we're always gonna have these surprise visitors that pop up that you didn't expect, and just to get a kid out of Texas to come up here and to come off of that Texas commitment enough to at least check it out. And, you know, that's a good sign for what we can expect in the future. And that's maybe the first step is you got to get them here And then once you keep getting guys here, other guys will notice, hey, they're getting this guy, they're getting this guy, they're getting this guy, and that kind of creates just like a waterfall effect, and they'll just keep adding that type of player on the campus regularly, and they're going to start landing that type of player.
Yeah, and definitely.
Winfield specifically, I think, is interesting because I believe he's the guy that committed to Texas during the Alabama National Championship game, once Sarkisian had been announced and everything at Texas. So here's a guy that, very highly ranked guy, coveted guy, and was sort of very early with this new regime that you would think would sort of be an exciting thing, like to be a part of that new wave and everything. And here he is at Michigan State the first week that officials there. We all know what Steve Sarkisian and Alabama have been doing with receivers lately. We know the brand recognition and prestige that comes with the burnt orange and everything. So add all that into it too for context when you're talking about what it meant to have this guy up here.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually a good point. I do believe I was seeing on Twitter that he had committed at the halftime of the national title game, and the guys in the Texas world were kind of saying like, oh, he was kind of influenced by what Devontae Smith has been doing in the Steve Sarkisian offense, so that was like what stuck out to him, and that's why he pulled the trigger. And like you said, he was one of the first building blocks for the new regime down there in Austin, and for him to take his first official here, just even if they don't land him, that's a great point. It just kind of shows the pull that these guys have. And all these developments we're talking about, all of this is coming after a 2-5 season where typically you'd think, where's all this excitement coming from? But it's all like self-generated from the staff, and just like the personalities they have and just the excitement they have to try to get these guys here. And then going ahead and talking about another guy, Jalen Lewis, who's from Brownsville, Tennessee. He's a guy that has an Oklahoma offer and some other big ones. He was somebody that the staff found very early on. I believe before most of these big-time offers, was Michigan State was one of his biggest offers, and they've continued to recruit him as these bigger schools came in there. They've continued to build a relationship, got him on campus, and he had a good visit. So that's just something that they're moving towards in the positive direction. It won't be an easy recruitment to win, but he was in town with somebody that he's close with from the state of Tennessee, and that's Knoxville native Shannon Blair. So these are two cornerbacks that they're recruiting from Tennessee. Just another example of this national approach that they have, but at the same time, guys that are interconnected with one another. I believe both of these guys are Elite 3 training buddies over there using the Elite 3 Academy. So I know, Corey, you've covered these guys and their Elite 3. Do you want to talk a little bit about this whole national recruiting thing in Elite 3 in Tennessee and just the dynamic that they're using of interconnected national recruiting and getting these guys in here with good relationships?
Yeah, Elite 3, that's one of the two big training places in Tennessee. So between them and another one, they hold most of the top players in the state. They train with one of those two. But Elite 3, they have Jalen Lewis and Shannon Blair, like you mentioned. But just they have a lot more guys. Michigan State's probably offered 10 of their guys. But we'll stick to the guys that visited this weekend. Lewis, like he had said going into it, there's a 95% chance that him and Anthony Brown would play together. Anthony Brown doesn't have Michigan State in his top group, but then it got kind of interesting because Anthony Brown really enjoyed his Arkansas visit, and then he was at Alabama today, and neither of those are really big options for Jalen Lewis. And then where it's more important for Michigan State is Jalen Lewis. I think he came away even more impressed with Michigan State than he expected. And then you have that connection to Shannon Blair, so he could almost like flip his allegiance and say, well, I might not be playing with Anthony Brown. I got to find out what's best for me. And that's what a lot of kids are going to learn as they actually get on visits, that these package deals kind of dissolve and you got to do what's best for you. So, but then he could also have Shannon Blair right there with him that could still give him a face that he's familiar with.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so that was kind of a good tidbit there about how that narrative is starting to not take shape with how Lewis and Brown wanted to like line up and play at the same school, but Blair's a connection that Lewis has that's very strong as well, so might be swapping out who he could potentially be a teammate with. We'll see what happens there. Alex Van Sumeren, big target, probably the biggest defensive target on the board. He seemed to have a great visit. Just, you guys want to talk a little bit about Alex Van Serman as a target, just what he would mean? Steven, you want to touch a little bit on his visit and just like how big of a target he is?
Sure. I mean, I remember first meeting Alex when he was going into his freshman year. He was at one of Michigan State's camps. And at that time, he looked like your run-of-the-mill, like, high school junior, senior linebacker, like a kid that's not going D1, but, like, you know, a bigger high school dude. He was, like, 6'2", like, 220-ish probably. And I was like, okay. And now, like, he's almost literally two of those people that I met. Put together, like with a bungee cord around him. Like he's very, very big. And then you watch these little videos that he's put out of his training and everything, and his footwork and balance and movement at that size are insane. I mean, he wears 21 because he plays a little bit of offense and does all that, you know, does some fullback, tight end stuff for them in high school, I believe. So
Yep.
You love to see that. I'm jealous as a former lineman. But yeah, I think he's his status as a top dog, I think, is warranted. He's not playing like in the Detroit Public League, I guess, or you know the biggest and best competition in Michigan. So you can take that for what it's worth. But I would imagine that these physical transformations he's made will carry over. I think he's probably I think his ceiling can be plenty high, but I think he's also just a very, very high floor guy. Like if you get him, I'd be very surprised if he's not at least a solid contributor for whoever gets this guy.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too. And like that's what I think I've mentioned a few times. I view him and Joshua Burnham from Traverse City, who committed to Notre Dame. I think those are the two safest picks in the state to be successful players. And then what I think makes Alex also so special besides all of that is with defensive tackles, and I mean offensive tackles, you can lump them in there too. The big guys, sometimes they don't have the motor, and there's no question about his motor. Like his motor's running like 100 miles per hour 100% of the time, and that's something that's going to translate to college because you know what you're getting with him, and that's huge.
Yeah, plus, I know Corey and I were talking about this a few days ago. Clemson doesn't offer a lot of guys to begin with, and they also usually opt for guys that are a little taller when they're recruiting the defensive line, and they've clearly made an exception here. Alex is 6'3", so he's not short by any means, but if you go ahead and look at some of the guys they've signed at that position over the years, they're usually 6'4", 6'5", so if Clemson is offering a very few allotment of defensive tackles, and Alex is not only one of them, but he's atypical in terms of the frame, that should kind of tell you all you need to know about just like how explosive he is. And if you don't want to take our word for it, take Dabo Sweeney's word for it. That's a guy that you definitely would want on your team. And then another guy that was here this week was Chase Carter. Chase is a defensive end from Minneapolis, Minnesota. He's a guy that we've covered a lot because the staff has gotten to do a lot of Zoom calls with him and his parents. He's a guy that they've prioritized on the defensive end position for quite a while. I believe the staff did at least 3 virtual visits with him between February and till the dead period started. One of them was with just his parents. And he's a guy that him and Curly Thomas, who's visiting this weekend, we'll talk about, those are 2 defensive ends that have been at the top of the recruiting board for a while for Ron Burton. And Carter had glowing words about his official visit. I talked to him about it at great lengths, and he even at one point messaged me during the visit to say how cool the stadium was and just how much he liked the campus. He's a guy that I believe had said that he was going to commit towards November or October, some sort of fall timeline, and after the visit he said that he was now thinking about committing in July, right after these visits are up. So he's clearly feeling good about his choices, and Michigan State's the only one he's visited so far, so you can kind of tell that he knows that he can see himself at least Michigan State, if not at some of the other schools as well. And he's a guy that you can probably come in and expect to maybe not contribute in the first year, but with his frame and his athleticism, he's a guy that should see the field pretty quickly. And that's obviously what Mel Tucker also thinks as well, with how he has taken an involvement with his recruitment directly. And then another guy that visited was Braden Miller. Corey, I know you cover the offensive line recruiting pretty directly, so you want to talk about Braden Miller and what his visit means?
Yeah, he's a good one. He's actually the only guy in the 2022 class outside of the state of Michigan that Michigan State coaches ever saw in person due to the shutdown, because he's from Colorado, and of course that's where a lot of those coaches came from. So he actually camped for them a couple times and went to a few games, so they got to meet him as a person and see him. Obviously back then he was about 240 pounds, and just a skinny kid with long arms, pretty tall, where now he's 6'6", 290. I think his arms measure out somewhere around like 33.5 inches or something like that. But yeah, just a really athletic kid that has a long-standing history with Chris Kapilovich and Jack Harris, the his assistant offensive line coach. On the visit, we've only talked a little bit. He's still taking it in. I've reached out to him again today, so I'm hoping to get something more on the visit from him. But what I think it's going to come down to, because he actually had canceled a lot of his other visits and teams that he had interest with, like Miami, Michigan, and a handful of those other teams. So I think it's going to come down to Michigan State and Stanford for him, who he visits at the end of June, I believe. He's got a brother there, but I think he's a third year, so it's not quite as much as an overlap, but it'll come down to those two teams, I think, at the end for him.
All right, sounds good. So then two other guys that visited were Kevin Winston, who doesn't really talk to the media too much about his visits, but he's a guy to keep track of and maybe see how that unfolds. And tight end Jack Nickel, who was the former Notre Dame commit, decommitted from the Fighting Irish, I believe, a couple months ago. Georgia guy, so, Mel Tucker and his staff love that. And he hasn't gotten back to us about his visit yet, but he's a guy that seemed to really like his time here. I believe Matt Wenzel did a story on him, and he had a lot of glowing words to say about his time in East Lansing. So we'll have something on that potentially here in the near future. And then the guy that was the talk of the entire weekend, and that's Chandler, Arizona quarterback Nico Marchiol. Steven, what do you make of Nico Marchiol's recruitment? What are your observations? What do you think about where this is heading? Just what's your take on this whole recruitment?
It seems pretty typical of chasing 4- and 5-star QBs. I mean, there's just kind of an extra layer that goes with it. I mean, it wasn't even 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think he was still committed to Florida State technically. But obviously behind the scenes, he was kind of thinking it over, rethinking, and maybe even maneuvering a little bit because of A.J. Duffy's commitment down there, and obviously Michigan State fans will remember that name. So maybe it'll just be a clean swap, NFL style. But I don't know. I think getting his first visit again means something. Yeah, I think in this setting, these circumstances, I think the first and last are going to be very important. I know the last has always been a thing for folks, but I think the first one has a real shot to just sort of set the obviously it sets the standard, but I think it has a chance to sort of just sit in the mind in a way that maybe it wouldn't have previously, because these guys have never experienced it. Your first time, you always remember some of these things a little bit finer, a little bit more crisp, I think. So it's interesting, he picked up the Arizona State crystal balls, and he was out there unofficially just a little bit before his Michigan State visit. He's got a West Virginia official, I think, that's still on the books. So, I mean, hey, I think it's, like I said, it's part of the game when you're recruiting QBs this high, especially when so many highly ranked QBs are off the board currently. And, I mean, he's wherever he's at, top 20, I believe, probably in the position in the class or whatever. So many of those top-ranked guys are already committed and locked down and don't seem to be moving much there. So he sort of becomes the belle of the ball at that point. And, if you're a Michigan State or Arizona State or just a QB-hungry team, I mean, you're willing to go above and beyond and try to get a guy like that. But the good news, I think, for Michigan State is, we'll see. We'll try to find out a little bit more about how things went and where the wind's blowing there. But I think the good news for Michigan State, as you guys know, is they don't seem to be lacking solid options there. At this point, on June 9th, it seems like they're going to end up with a pretty good guy under center. Even if it goes a multitude of different directions.
Yeah, definitely. Corey, anything to add there?
Yeah, I agree. I think coming in, he kind of had the first at bat, but maybe not a lot of pressure to make a decision. But now the pressure is getting turned up in the opposite direction from Michigan State, because he had Justin Martin there literally the day he left. And then you got Caton Hauser that we'll probably talk about later in the show, but he's looming soon and quick. So, I mean, now that's going to kind of swing the momentum back to Michigan State having the upper hand in the recruitment, and maybe Nico needs to make a decision a little quicker than maybe he planned before, or maybe, he jumps at it and maybe he doesn't and that becomes somebody else. But I agree with Steven. I mean, I think there's 4 guys. I think they'll get one of those 4 guys, and if they get any of those guys, they got a really good quarterback in this class.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess we can kind of just talk about that Hauser news a little bit right now, since we're talking about the quarterback. So basically, 24/7's West Coast guy, Greg Biggins, was out there at the Elite 11 California stop in Santa Monica, I believe. And basically, they had seen that Caton Hauser was playing exactly up to their expectations. Our guys over there at 24/7 have had him rated as a 4-star for a while now, which is higher than most of the other sites have him. And he first did a great job showing off his skills at Steve Clarkson's QB retreat 2 weeks ago, according to Greg Biggins here. And then at the Elite 11 regional in California, he was, quote, their top guy there and was the most consistent quarterback from drill to drill. In talking to several Elite 11 coaches after the camp, they said it was unanimous for them as well in naming Hauser the top quarterback of the day. So he obviously showed why he's a guy that Michigan State is trying to flip from Boise State. And in addition to just the evaluation here from Biggins, he also noted that Caton Hauser has moved up his official visit from June 25th to the weekend of June 18th. So that's one more weekend moved up in the timeline for Caton's visit. And additionally, he has canceled his unofficial visits to North Carolina and Duke. So that's possibly why this extra free time led him to move this visit up. But that's interesting news, though, because they like Caton enough to accept his commitment if he did choose to give it on that visit. So this kind of puts Nico on a little bit of a time crunch, like you guys were saying. So I guess not really. We don't want to speculate too much on what moving up this visit means, because, like I said, it could just be from him having more availability. But at the same time, there's lots of layers to consider here with how might this impact Nico's timeline and who might MSU end up with. But it's safe to say, like both of you guys said, that both of these guys are great quarterbacks, and if they land either one of these, or even Martin or Luther Richardson, they will have a good quarterback in this class.
Yeah, definitely. And then I guess I'll add to it before we move on to that one. I think by him eliminating the 2 East Coast teams, Duke and North Carolina, that's huge for Michigan State, because now I think you're looking at it where it's going to be Boise, who he's already visited and liked, and it's going to be Michigan State. And he's going to know what he needs to know at that point. So I don't think there's any other teams that have his interest. So this could be one that, I'm not calling that he's going to commit on the visit. I'm sure he's going to go home and think about things. But I imagine he's the guy that will have a final decision by the end of June.
Yeah, that would make sense. Whether he sticks with Boise or Michigan State, seems like someone that wants to be decisive and come to a decision. So I'm going to just go ahead and go over the 7 visitors we have for June 11th real quick, because then I want to talk about these in-person camps that we've gotten a chance to see. So right now for this upcoming weekend, Friday, June 11th, we have cornerback Caleb Coley from Warner Robins, Georgia, that's expected to visit. He has an offer from Clemson very recently, and he's a guy that has great tape. Definitely check that out. It would be a big land for Michigan State if they're able to pick up his commitment this cycle. We have Davian Collins from Covington, Georgia. He's a guy that just ran a 4.44 40-yard dash in Knoxville at a Tennessee camp, so great speed there. We have Alessandro Lorenzetti, who's an offensive tackle that plays in Connecticut. One of the notable things about him is that the Montreal native here, Lorenzetti, he picked up an offer from Georgia this morning, Wednesday, and we also obviously all know about the Penn State offer he picked up a few days ago. So great job by Coach Cap there getting out in front of things, and we'll kind of see where his recruitment goes, but Michigan State will get a chance to sell him on the visit this weekend, and Corey was able to confirm today that that is still set. And we have Quavian Carter from Leesburg, Georgia. So that's the third Georgia guy that I've named so far. He's the guy that was at Florida State right when the dead period was lifted. So that's a battle that Michigan State will have right there. He's the guy they're looking at linebacker. So that's one of the few names we finally have been able to uncover at linebacker. We have Curly Thomas, who's the defensive end from Fort Worth, Texas. I mentioned him earlier. Like Chase Carter, he's a guy that's been at the top of the board at that position for the entirety of the recruiting cycle. And we have tight end Michael Masunas, who plays on the same high school team as Nico Marchiol. There's no indication that they're going to team up or anything like that, but it is something interesting to watch there, as Michigan State could definitely use a tight end, and he's a 6'5", 235 guy, great measurables. And the recent addition to this list is kicker Will Stone from Austin, Texas. He's a guy that just picked up a Michigan State offer after he camped there earlier in the month, and he's someone that's been on the radar for the entirety of the recruiting cycle as well. I know they were sending him edits almost like 8 months ago, so he's a guy that he could commit, we'll see, but he might also have some unofficial visits, as I know Steven and I were talking about on the message board a couple days ago. So interesting set of visitors we have this week. But now, so one of the things that were really cool about the dead period ending was the three of us got a chance to go out to the Sound Mind, Sound Body camp at Ferris State. That was organized by Curtis Blackwell, and one of the cool things about that camp was that not only were there a lot of kids that Michigan State was kind of looking to evaluate and things like that, but it was a chance for Michigan State coaches to get out there and interface with just local figures like high school coaches, the players themselves, trainers that were coming up from all over the area that were busing kids over there. Just a great scene to be a part of. So I guess I know Steven got a chance to talk to Mel extensively. Just Steven, what were your thoughts on just the camp as a whole, your interactions with Mel, just overall, like what were your takeaways? What would you like gather from that whole camp?
Well, I think to start, for something that I hadn't done in over a year to that degree, it felt surprisingly normal. Like, it seems like it was so long ago that I'd done something like that, but yet when I showed up, it felt very, very normal to be around a ton of people, outside, not, no mask requirements, obviously, after June 1st and everything. Mm-hmm. So that alone was interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think this was the third or fourth time that I've ever spoken to Mel Tucker in person. Mm-hmm. There was his introduction. He came to a basketball game once. I think there was one other time before that. So just that. And it was the first time I'd talked to all these other guys in person, whether it was Piegler or Jay Johnson or Coach Cap. All these guys I'd only met through Zoom or electronically text and all that. So that was cool, too, to finally, see him face to face and just have a real conversation. In terms of Tucker, I mean, he kept it pretty vanilla, I thought. Like, when we were talking to him, his message to the campers I thought was cool about being more than football and the importance of a degree and having a plan and things like that. He was just saying a lot of the things that we've heard from him, though, I think through the spring, where you get a strong indication that he's just kind of in grind mode. I mean, I asked him about a vacation. He was like, "What's that?" I mean, he knows that they're still behind in a lot of ways. I think he's happy with how he can finally see some things heading, and he can sort of project pathways out to certain things. And I think he likes where that's going in a lot of fronts. But still, I think it's still at the end of the day a lot of catch-up mode type of a philosophy.
Yeah, definitely. Corey, your thoughts on Sound Mind, Sound Body?
Yeah, it's great to just be out there and, like you said, being able to see the coaches, let everybody put faces to stuff. So that was really nice. Get to see how Mel conducts himself as a person and just the presence he carries.
Yeah, definitely. Just getting to see Mel walking around that field, meeting with the coaches, meeting with the recruits, you could kind of see just like the pull that he has, and just like kind of the vibes that you kind of have if you're the head coach of Michigan State. People want to come talk to you, want to take pictures, want to shake your hand. So it was great to just see all of those interactions take place. And yeah, we all got a chance to talk to Mel Tucker, so that was cool. We got a chance to talk to a lot of the assistants. Those guys are always fun to talk to. So it was just, great all around, just great, a lot of interfacing opportunities for everyone in all sorts of ways. But with that, I also want to touch on, there was a Wayne State camp a couple days ago. I know Steven went to that. Corey and I did not. Steven, were there any takeaways from that camp? Any sort of observations you made? Which coaches were there? What that camp was like? Just anything notable that MSU fans might find interesting from there?
Sure. I mean, I think it would definitely, prospect-wise, it was not in the same league as Sound Mind, Sound Body, and that was a little disappointing, but I kind of knew that going in as well. And just like Sound Mind, Sound Body, I think for the Michigan State coaches, half the value, if not more, maybe even 51% of the reason to go was just to get your face out there and meet some of these guys, especially when you're talking about Wayne State, and I can see the Rensen in the backdrop, and being in the heart of Detroit, which is, obviously we all know a key area to recruit in Michigan. So that was important. Both coordinators were out there. Courtney Hawkins was out there, Harlan Barnett was out there, and then a couple other GAs too, because they're allowed to get out and do some of this stuff right now. So another big showing from them. I saw them, all the defensive coaches checking out Jeremiah Caldwell from Belleville a decent amount. He was probably one of the better players out there overall. Again, it was wasn't super high on proven, sort of D1 offer guys at this point, but he was one, and I thought he looked good at his size. I thought he moved pretty well. Talked to him about a Michigan State visit that he took earlier this month, and he had some good things to say. And he's a guy that, like a lot of these DBs, they're recruiting with sort of versatility in mind, and maybe not a hard label on him. But they're telling him they could play anywhere. He could play anywhere back there, and that's sort of the skill set I saw when I was watching him in one-on-ones. He moves pretty well for a 6'2", 6'3" guy. I think to me he's more of a safety, but nice skill set back there, and that was probably the highlight, I guess, of what I saw over there.
Yeah, that's a good observation. I think that kind of label applies to a lot of the Michigan State DB prospects, the versatility there and the fluidity between positions. And just that kind of reminded me, one of the observations from the Sound Mind, Sound Body camp was while all those players are doing drills and whatnot, a lot of the guys are coming up and talking to the coaches. And one of those guys that did a lot of talking with offensive coordinator Jay Johnson was 5-star 2023 quarterback Dante Moore. He was the guy that was talking to Mel Tucker, talking to Jay Johnson, spent a lot of time getting coached up by Jay Johnson after some of the reps. So that was something interesting there, maybe something to watch as that recruitment takes shape. And then also, I know we were all impressed by 2025 quarterback Bryce Underwood, who's going to be enrolled at Belleville, I believe, this next cycle. So and then also 2024 quarterback Isaiah Marshall was there, and Michigan State got a chance to look at him. So there's some good quarterbacks here in the future for the state of Michigan recruiting, and Mel Tucker and Jay Johnson got a chance to talk to them in person. So yeah, even though, like you were saying, a lot of the benefits of these camps is interfacing with coaches and getting your face out there, they also did get a chance to build some meaningful connections with some phenoms in the future classes for Michigan State. And then just some final takeaways here. We have on the 10th of June, we have listed on our website on the recruiting visits tracker. Check that out if you haven't already. We have guys like Jaden Mangum visiting on the 10th, and we also have Christian Stokes visiting on the 10th. So the day this will be airing, you guys will be listening tomorrow, and those are some of the tidbits to watch for tomorrow. And just beyond that, make sure you check out Spartan Tailgate. That's where you'll find all three of our guys' work. Get a VIP subscription if you haven't, if you really want the good stuff. And just thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks, Stephen, for joining us. And until next time, this was the Spartan Beat.